Hi, everybody. It's Tim Hughes here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Leadership Associates. With me today, I've got Oliver Medill.
Medill.
Right?
No, it's most people get it wrong. It's Medill. It's
Medill.
Irish, Irish
in one
apparently.
go rather than two syllables.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
So I've got Oliver Medill with me today. Oliver's written a book about speaking.
Speaking,
and communication. So what was it that got you to write the book? What was the motivation, and what was the thing that actually got you to started on writing it?
I think good question. I think it's actually very interesting how it's come about. I think having spoken to thousands of people over the last 15 years that I have been speaking for a living, it does seem to be a challenge. And statistically, I found out that it was recently, public speaking was voted mankind's greatest fear. I think death came third in that survey. And
dentistry was probably,
well, apparently spiders was number two, but I think the fact that you'd actually prefer to be in the coffin than speaking at the funeral does sort of speak volumes. And I know that it is an irrational fear because no one actually dies, but it is still something that, particularly in today's environment of startup Britain, and I think the statistics are massive around the amount of entrepreneurs looking to find their feet with small to medium enterprises. The need to communicate either face-to-face or via a webcam is more and more pressing. So I thought to myself, right, okay, it's time. You've got enough material here from people's experiences, and there's a need, and you've got 15 to 20 years experience of public speaking. So why not write a book? So I think it came very much from the perspective of step out of the shadows into the limelight. Because I think I speak for lots of people who perhaps aren't the most extrovert, aren't the most outgoing, and yet still need to communicate. And I don't think it's about being naturally extroverted. I think it's about having a very specific set of skills that anyone can learn. So anyone can learn charisma. Anyone can learn. I know where you laugh. In fact, I'd love to know why you laugh. But anyone can learn charisma. Anyone can learn the techniques for telling a great story, for captivating an audience. It's just applying yourself to do it in the first.
So we're gonna talk about your 10P structure. We're not going to do that. I'm going to do that right now, but I want to mention that up front. I mean, your journey in terms of you see yourself as an introvert, though you don't come across as one. I would see myself as an introvert as well, though I don't come across as one.
Right.
I can't remember. When I did some management training at my previous company, there was a particular term for it. But you actually you've been an actor, haven't you?
Yes, and once again, I think I was the product of very outspoken parents and a high achieving sister, and I think I was very much the grey person in the corner, and I just thought, okay, you can either carry on being like this and sort of envying the achievements of your outgoing, high-flying family, or you can do something about it. So almost perversely, my decision to become an actor was because of the terror of actually stepping up and performing or communicating, but also because I did feel that it was an opportunity. It was a sort of unspoken permission to express yourself. So I did seem to be okay at it. I was a professional actor for 10 years, got myself a good agent, went through drama school, all that stuff. So, and that was a journey in itself, but it was prompted very much by the need to step up in life.
One of the things that I never saw myself as a presenter.
Right.
And I was very lucky that I attended I don't know if you ever remember that we used to have a computer company in the UK. It's now been absorbed into Fujitsu. It was called International Computers Limited or ICL.
Right.
And I was on the graduate scheme there, and I did a week training course on how to present. And that structure stayed with me. And whenever I did a presentation, I'd get the structure out and I'd follow that structure. One of my friends gave a presentation which was on why wine was, and it's a male friend. He did a presentation on why wine was better than men.
Okay.
Because one of the things that he was told was that know your audience, and actually when I see our talk on the graduates, it was actually 55% of the people were female.
Right. Okay.
Because they seem to perform better at the assessment center.
Sure.
I stuck to the structure, and I think if you're nervous, the structure gives you something to hold on to. At which point you then relax and then you speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right.
And for me, for somebody who now speaks for a living, in fact, I don't write my presentations. My co-founder writes them for me, and I have to learn them.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because I'll digress slightly. So he said to me, when people go to conferences, do they go to be entertained or to learn something? And I said, learn something. He said, no, they go to be entertained. So it's entertain
right.
one, learning something number two, rather than what I write, which is learning something number one and entertaining number two.
Yes, I think that's right. And I've actually got rather a cheesy colleague who calls it entertainment, which I hate, but it kind of sums it up. Yes.
It is. And he writes that, I mean, they're not TEDx, they're not TEDx present, but it's that style.
Yes.
Of because we had a whole week in Amsterdam together.
Okay.
And rather than going out and because we were working, rather than going out and enjoying the city, we actually watched TEDx things, and we actually we learned the structure of it.
Right. Okay.
And that's the way that we see. If we write a presentation, it's very TEDx related, which is metaphor, a metaphor and fact, and punchline type going through for 15 minutes.
Yes, I think it's about, is it not sort of 18 minutes or something that a TED talk is supposed to last for?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's absolutely right, and I think lots of people go through these sort of in-house training courses, and they will learn fundamental structures that work. So that tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them is the old, trusted, and true. But it does work. And I think what you're talking about with the TEDx and the various nuances and what I believe we're going to be discussing shortly are refinements. And I think they're still what I call the difference that makes the difference. Because you can have a good structure and it will be informative, but you're probably not going to be entertaining people with that structure. It's the other stuff on top that you need as well. Yeah. So
Oliver, let's go through your 10 Ps.
Okay.
Because I was fascinated when we. Some people think I just get on the internet and riff these, but I actually prepare them, which actually surprises people. Right. But I was fascinated with your 10 Ps, and I started writing them down, and it's a great structure. Something that I would certainly recommend that people would look at, especially if like you and me, they're terrified of actually speaking, or were terrified of speaking.
Yeah, and I think as with most things, the more you do them, the easier they become. I think like me, you've had the opportunity with your career and in social media and your expertise in that area to speak up, to stand and deliver pretty much as often as you like. And I'm assuming, I may be wrong, but I'm assuming that you now thoroughly enjoy the process.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Or you wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do it. No, exactly. I love it. I love standing up in front of salespeople,
right,
and talking to them about social selling and the impact of social media.
Sure.
Everybody knows I'm extremely passionate about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just love it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm living the dream, I think would be the.
Yeah. Well, it's brilliant. In fact, I must take some time to tap your brains actually, because my social media skills are they're growing, but they're not quite where I need them to be. I suppose that's for another time.
So your 10 Ps.
My 10 Ps, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I call this, and if you get to read the book, you'll find that a lot of the the doctrines or the lessons in the book are all about stickiness. So I try and make them as memorable as possible by using alliteration, acronyms, or structure, because they stick in the mind. And the anecdote architect, which is what I've called the storytelling structure, is just that, and it's alliterative, so it consists of 10 P's. You don't have to use them all, but it's about building a story based on the following things. So we start with the process, and the process is the ability to associate the audience with the story. Or the relevance of the story, and for that you need a process, and there are various methods. You can ask a great question. So I think it was very much like you were talking about with your TEDx. Ask a question to stimulate the audience interest. Instead of a question, you can use a statistic, a did you know? Because again, you're bringing people in, you're focusing them on that particular area. You can get the audience to do something. So quite often, you know, I've got
stand up.
Yeah, stand up, and try and make it relevant. I think if you get them to stand up and turn around 3 times with absolutely no relevance whatsoever, it probably won't work. So it needs to be a relative something, or a strong quote. And quite often, you know, if you do some research in advance and you think about a quote, and obviously being the Twitter meister that you are, you'll know far better than I that, you know, the Twitter feeds are absolutely strewn with fantastic motivational quotes, and that tends to get the focus, the attention. So question, statistic, get the audience to do something, or a quote will generally work quite well. Or you can just refer to a topical event as well. So that's step 1, process. You then go into the story itself, and you need to get your audience to picture. So the second P is the picture. Picture the event. You need to set the scene, which provides a context for the audience, because I think if you go straight into the action, they're not going to know where they are. So get them to picture the scene, and the more vividly you can create the image, the better, because you know, we think in pictures. The two ways we think is self-talk and the pictures we make. So we are the movie makers of our own mind. So we're already geared to do this. So if you get the audience to picture the scene, use the various senses. So if there was, you know, I don't know, if there was a smell involved, you know, my mother was baking bread next door. So kind of build the story sensorily as well, tends to work particularly well. And gets the buy-in. You then move into the third P, which is protagonists, or the characters in your story. So in setting of the scene, you need to introduce the characters or the protagonists, and the more colorfully you do this, the more detailed you do this, the better. And it isn't just about having the structure. If you follow this process, it also helps you to become more observant, because one of the biggest challenges I hear is people will say, well, I don't really have any stories to tell. But actually, we've got stories going on around us all day long. It's just about becoming aware of them and starting to focus on them. So the protagonists, again, start to notice how people walk, the kind of tone or timbre of their voice, what kind of expressions they pull, what's their posture like. The more you can start observing this, the more color, the more texture, the more depth, the more interest you're going to be able to weave into your stories. So number 3 is protagonists. The next thing is the person. Now, what I mean by the person is, what's your narrative style going to be? Most of the time, we tell a story from the first person, i.e., I and me. And it's, I think, probably the most popular technique. If it's a story that, you know, contains real personal relevance, obviously the I works best. Yep. The other option is, of course, the third person, which, if you have a more of an overarching scene, or once upon a time there was, it's the classic children's story tale, but you'll find fairy tale, but you'll find that a lot of the great storytellers will think about their audience. They'll work on their story first up to engage the audience, and they will use a generic third person just as a scene setter. So it's a choice, but it's a choice that you need to make consciously. So that's the next P. Then we've got dialogue, or what I call patter. So making sure that the more conversation or dialogue you can use as part of your story, the more it will come to life, because real people talk. And again, the more you can actually relate the dialogue or the patter that happens in the story, the more people will associate with its realism. They'll be dragged into it. So far, we've talked about the details, the sensory details, what people look like, what they sound like, the colors, the scene. So you're really creating the story. So it isn't just enough to say this happened, then this, then this. You're building a story. So we've set the scene with all these details and the color and the texture. And so people are sort of on the edge of their seats. You then introduce the next P, which is the problem. Every good story has to have a challenge. And so once you've explained the relevance of your story and the characters, there has to be a struggle. You have to introduce a struggle. It can be a confrontation. It can be, a huge sort of dilemma for someone. And every story contains a journey. And this is where the journey, it started out fine, and all of a sudden we're in sort of turbulence. So that's the next piece. And with that, you have to then describe the perception of your protagonist. So of your main character, you have to describe the emotions involved from your main character's perspective when faced with this problem. It isn't just enough to say this happened. Oh dear, you've got to say how you felt, what you saw, what you heard, what was going through your mind. And with that, we're into the next P, which is the plan that you came up with. So just to recap quickly, we started off with, we talked about the process to get people in. You're getting them to picture the scene. You've introduced the protagonists. You're deciding which person to tell the story from. You've included dialogue or patter. The problem has arisen. You've then sort of dealt with the perception, the emotions that you have, and you've come up with your plan. And obviously, in order for a story to work, something has to happen as a result of the struggle. You can't just sort of leave it there. And the solution that you come up with. And then the last two points is the pertinent point or the moral. Every good story, sort of like the old-fashioned Aesop's fables, needed a moral. So you need a key learning, which is the pertinent point. And again, it needs to encapsulate the learning from the whole of the story. And then finally, you've got the personal perspective. Share your beliefs about what you've learned and how it's changed you. Whatever this story has meant to you, it's about sharing your own beliefs before you then move on. So that's the storytelling structure. And again, if you follow it, it works like a dream. And
so putting you on the spot, can you give us a quick example of that?
Well, yes. Okay. So I would say, first of all, can you remember your first speech? Would be my process. So picture the scene. It's Loughborough University. It is 2004. It is my first opportunity to speak for a well-known international speaking consultancy called Speakers International. I've been sent up there on my own. I've been told that there are 1,000 people from the Inland Revenue going to be there. So it's a sunny day. I have a slight incident with my car on the way up. Someone runs into the back of my car, which wasn't ideal. I get out and the drivers of the car do a runner. So I've got a bashed in back of my car, which I suppose in hindsight was a good thing because it distracted me from the woes and the nerves of my first speech. So I arrive there. It's a huge auditorium. Everyone's looking very stressed, but it doesn't have a rake. It's just a big hall. They have just been told that a third of them are going to lose their jobs. So I wasn't aware of any of this. And I was told to wait outside in the green room. And I heard on the microphone that so you'll know when to come in. One guy had a lapel mic, and he said, "And now here's someone to motivate us." And I thought to myself, they've just been told a third of them are going to lose their job. Here's someone to motivate you. So I walk in, and there's a pretty disgruntled audience. But the challenge is So we've got our introducing speaker, but he's being heckled by some of the guys from the back who are starting to give him quite a lot of grief around, why haven't we been told this before? Where's the disclosure? So far, just to put you in sequence, I've done the process. So I've asked you a question, I've pictured the scene, and I've started to introduce the protagonists. I'm sort of included in one of them. I'm telling it from my person, so the first person. So I stand up and I realize that I can't see the back of the room. So I'm also looking around for a handheld microphone, and there's only one lapel microphone. It belongs to Ken, who's the guy who's introduced me. So I have 1,000 people in the room. I have no way of seeing the back, and I have no amplification. So this was now my problem in the story. So what did I do about it? I actually had
You're now moving on to the plan.
Well, I'm now moving on to the plan, but I'm also going to be using the dialogue. I'm going to be coming back to the patter as well. So I then have to use a chair to stand on. So I'm at the front of a hall with 1,000 people standing on a chair, and I'm yelling my way through my speech, which is not really how I envisaged it would be. And one of the guys from the back said, "You're going to give us a song then?" And I thought, I hadn't anticipated any kind of heckling at all. And I said, well, maybe later, and kind of plowed through regardless. And so, we got to the stage where I was trying not to tremble too much as I was standing on this chair. People could see me right up to sort of thigh level. And this was completely unplanned. So in the end, what I had to do was to make sure that I was focusing, and this is one of my big learnings, was I started focusing on the hecklers. And no one had taught me this. I just thought, because they kept on chirping up and saying, "I don't believe it, it's rubbish." And so in the end, I said, okay, so, sorry, can I just ask you to come to the front? And I don't think he was expecting that. I didn't know what I was going to do with it when he came to the front, but I just thought this has to be the right thing to do, because I can't just carry on mumbling my way or even shouting my way through this with no resolution. So he came to the front, and I said, and I asked him the question. I said, "I appreciate the fact you've just had some bad news." And he said, "Yeah, I have had some quite bad news today." And I said, is it fair enough to suggest that you're disgruntled? He said, "Yes, absolutely." And I said, what is it about me that has provoked this response? And I just thought I'm going to be confrontational. And he said, "You look a bit young." So this is way back when. So I appreciate that I don't look young now. And I thought to myself, well, that's okay. And so I asked him the question. I said, "Do you have children?" And he went, "Yes." And I said, do your children ever teach you anything?" And he went, "From time to time." And I said, "Okay, I appreciate you don't want to be here. I appreciate this isn't ideal for you. But give me just another 20 minutes for this child to teach you something. If I haven't, by all means, leave. We can call it a day, but give me the 20 minutes. And he kind of paused a moment and finally went, 20 minutes, and sort of merged back into the audience. Anyway, so I sort of breathed a huge sigh of relief. But it was a huge learning for me, because I just thought, expect the unexpected, accept and build. So I think the pertinent point for me was that you can learn all you like. I think that the key is to practice to the extent where you're very, very comfortable with the flow, and then to trust yourself to deal with the unexpected, because any military man will tell you that nothing ever goes according to plan. But the reason that people plan and prepare so hard is that they can then be flexible in the moment. If you haven't done the planning and the rehearsal, you're all at sea, or whatever.
Is it Mike Tyson said that a plan goes all very well until someone punches you in the face?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's going straight into my top pocket, and I shall use that the next time I'm on stage in 2 days' time. So from the personal perspective, the last thing I'd say about that particular incident was It was terrifying at the time. It was one of those situations that I thought to myself, I don't know how to deal with. I haven't been taught how to deal with this. I've never had this kind of heckling before. Having got through it, and somehow, I don't know, my native wit kind of guided me. I did come away from that after a day or two of sort of trauma, where I said to myself, I can actually handle anything now. And as a result, I've spoken at the O2. So audiences of up to 8,000 is the kind of thing that I do, and I'm sure you have big audiences as well on a weekly basis.
Yeah, not of 8,000, but yeah.
But I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you are in your own skin, the more confident you become. But I would never underestimate the importance of planning and rehearsal. It's the old adage: prior planning and preparation prevents particularly poor performance, or words to that effect. Yeah. So I hope that's given you a flavour.
Oliver, that's been fantastic. Thank you. It's a great example and a great case study of putting the 10 Ps into a practical situation. Yeah. And seeing the way that you presented and dealt with that.
Yeah.
And it's been fascinating talking to you in terms of your journey and the great advice that you give in terms of helping people to present and communicate. So before we finish, can remind everybody what the name of your book is?
Oh yes, sorry. The book is called The Impact Formula. And I think the subtitle is Powerful Solutions for Turbo.
And it's available on Amazon?
Yes, it's on Amazon. You can get it in bookshops as well. I think it's in Waterstones. It's on Sale & Blackwell's. I think Terminal 4. I'm not sure about Terminal 3, but various airport outlets as well. So yes, it's in bookshops and online at Amazon. And there's also my website if you're interested in finding out more about the book or about the tools and techniques. It's allaboutimpact.co.uk.
Allaboutimpact.co.uk.
Yes,
fantastic. Absolutely. And your so just so everybody knows, it's Oliver Medill.
Medill. I know it's a ridiculous surname. MEDL. Yes.
You're on LinkedIn is the best place to get hold of you.
Yes, so I'm on LinkedIn, but I'm also on Twitter, and I think my Twitter thing is @ImpactFormula. So I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. Yes.
Fantastic. It's been great talking to you today, Oliver.
And you. Thank you for having me.
Great learning and a great example. I'm so pleased you stood up to that and were able to work at it like that. It's a bit like asking, being on Parkinson and turning to John Lennon and saying, "John Lennon, will you sing for us?" and him sort of saying no or something like that. I wasn't sure what was going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was a bit of an unscheduled curveball, but actually, if it doesn't work under pressure, then
I agree.
I shouldn't be doing it. So, yeah.
Thanks, Oliver. Great to talk to you.
Great pleasure. Many thanks for having me. And
you're welcome. Have a good day.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.